Does money buy happiness? What if I told you that it does indeed? But there's a catch. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my podcast. It's your host, Anjy. And today I'm back with a very interesting video. Today I'm talking about happiness and in the context of money, financial wealth, status in society. Does money buy happiness? There's this age old saying, money does not buy happiness. You don't need money to be happy. Actually, you're wrong. If you've been told that before, then send that person this video and tell them that they're wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. So, in order to study human happiness, or rather, categorize human happiness, I've broken it down into three things: circumstances, well-being, and behavior. I've got my iPad here in case you guys are wondering what's she looking at. I've actually made some notes and I'm going to be going through them in this video. So circumstances, behavior, and well-being. For your circumstances, let's call that your income, whether high or low. For your behavior, let's call that your attitude towards your income. And lastly, your well-being. Do you see how all three of those link together? Your attitude is dependent on your well-being and your circumstances, but also your behavior and your circumstances is also dependent on your well-being. And also your well-being is very much reliant on your circumstances. So let's just get into it. I've picked three studies today to help us discuss the relationship between money and well-being in the context of well-being, because that's what is actually measurable. The first study actually measures experienced well-being. The second study measures evaluative well-being, and the third study measures both. So let's start with experienced well-being. What is experienced well-being? It's basically how you feel at a moment in time, in real time, during the moment of your life, in the everyday moments of your life. How do you experience life? That's experienced well-being. And with evaluative well-being, it's more retrospective. As one study said, a pause and reflects. And these studies are actually according to how old they are. So first, second, third being the latest. The first study linking happiness to finances, linking happiness to income, actually found that the higher your income, the higher your experienced well-being, up until you earn $75,000. Beyond which, your happiness kind of starts to plateau. What does that mean? It sort of doesn't get any better. It just sort of stays the same. And a possible explanation for this is that anything below 75, you sort of need more in order for you to feel like you're getting your basic needs met, right? And anything above 75, the study actually called it all about keeping score. So it no longer has to do with how much you need to meet your basic well-being. It's now about how much you earn relative to other people, how much you earn relative to your sibling, relative to your friends, relative to your peers, relative to anyone around you, whoever it is that you compare yourself to. That is what happiness is related to when it gets higher than $75,000. Whereas when it's below $75,000, every extra dollar you earn below 75, so say you're at $50,000, every extra $1,000 that you keep earning at that level sort of adds an extra layer of comfort and improvement to your life, where you actually feel the impact of that pay rise. But then after $75,000, it sort of doesn't really feel that exciting anymore. That research was corroborated by a second study. This is the latest study now in 2018 that actually sort of measured global satiation. That's what it called it, measured global satiation. And for this, the figures are actually a little bit higher. So for life evaluation, when people evaluated their life, because this is the second study that's evaluative well-being, right? The first one is experience well-being, and this second study is about evaluative well-being. So when people evaluated their life and thought about how much money they needed to feel great about themselves and feel great about their lives, they thought they needed $95,000 to feel happy with their lives. $95,000. However, this same study found that $75,000 is indeed the amount that people felt like they needed in order to have emotional well-being. So that sort of confirms, right, the first study, kind of corroborates the first study, which kind of says, yeah, when you evaluate your life, like your entire well-being, your entire quality of life, perhaps you may want $75,000, but the need for that is no longer about fulfilling your basic needs. It's no longer about, being able to have enough food to eat, enough to drink, or enough shelter, enough clothing. It starts to become sort of about social status, about comparison, and, just how you feel relative to the people around you. This is very interesting. And this study actually touched on something very important called happiness adaptation, which I will not get into in this video. I will get into it in my next video. So stay tuned for that, because I'll talk about why rich people are sad. Yep, I'm going to talk about why rich people may just be as sad as you are. But let's move on now to the third and final study. So this is the latest study that was done in 2020, and it measured both experienced and evaluative well-being. So let's recap. Experienced well-being is in real time. How fulfilled you feel in this moment, how happy you feel in this moment, how much you think that money impacts your life right in this moment. And then evaluative well-being is retrospective, how you feel that, back then, I think I was actually happy with just earning £20 a day. Like, it's fine, right? I was actually all right. Wouldn't you say that is kind of a biased opinion? Because humans have the tendency to forget pain. Just like we have the tendency to forget pain, we actually can be biased and not very accurate in our recollection of past memories and past experiences. So that's why this study is actually very interesting. That's why this study is particularly better than the other two, because this study actually measured real-time experienced well-being. And how did they do this? They collected data at 1,725,994 data points. So that's how many reports they evaluated. And these reports came from 33,391 people. So what were the participants like? They were all employed people in the United States between the ages of 18 and 65. And the study measured their take-home salary before taxes. Perhaps that's kind of a downside of this study, because depending on what state you live, your taxes might actually be higher or lower. So perhaps they should have measured take-home income after taxes. So regardless, let's get into it. How did this study measure experienced well-being in real time? So they sent signals to participants' phone throughout the day at random times of the day, at random intervals of the day. You get like a pop-up notification on your phone that's just like ding, and then you look at it and you're like, oh, okay. And then you're asked or prompted rather to answer questions, right? In real time, you're getting real-time information from the participants. So what kind of questions were they asked, right, when they got this pop-up on their phones? Well, the question about experienced well-being was, how do you feel right now? And instead of a very objective yes or no answer, they used a continuous sliding scale to get the results. So when you fill in surveys and it's like agree, completely agree, disagree, neutral, completely disagree, that's the sort of thing that this study did. So they went on a scale of very good to very bad, right? How do you feel right now? Very good to very bad. So you can imagine there's, a few more things in the middle. Now, the second question was more evaluative. So that question was, overall, how satisfied are you with your life right now? How satisfied are you? That's such a tough question. How satisfied are you with your life right now? And, the prompts that these people responded to was not at all to extremely satisfied. So they asked people to answer in real time based on how they felt right up until the moment that they got this notification on their phones. Do you not agree that this is a more accurate way of collecting data than asking people to recollect, when you were 20, when you were 50, did this money make you happy? It's not as reliable as real-time data. Now, on to the interesting bit. What did this study find? To recap, the first study found that the higher your income, the higher your happiness, up until $75,000. The second study found that indeed people were fine earning $75,000. That was how much they needed to feel okay emotionally, right? And $95,000 was how much they felt like they needed to have a good life. However, this study found that indeed, the higher your income, the larger your income, the higher your evaluative and your experienced well-being. And there was no plateau. Boom. There was no plateau. So the higher your income, the higher your well-being went. Interestingly though, there's something I want to show you guys. This is something I looked at and I thought it was worth talking about. If you can see clearly, I'm going to put up a picture on the screen. There's a dip right around this number. So I would say it's between $80,000 to $100,000. There was a tiny dip in both experience well-being and life satisfaction, right? Which is evaluative well-being. There was a bit of a dip there around that $100,000 before it went up again. So I'm very intrigued to find out why there was that dip. What's that all about? Was this data kind of fabricated? Why did it go back up? Well, you can kind of link it back to study number 2, right? Where it talked about happiness adaptation, where even though you have more money, it doesn't really make that much of a difference anymore because you've already had enough to make you feel good. You've already had enough to satisfy your basic need. But why did it go back up again? I understand the reason for the dip, but why did it go back up again? I'm very intrigued. I'm very, very intrigued. And I think we have an answer for that. Before we get to the answer though, I want to ask you guys a question. Is higher income linked to feeling more good, or is higher income just linked to feeling less bad? Or is it both? Well, luckily for us, we don't have to think about that too long because this study went a step further to study that. This study found the higher your income, the more your positive feelings, and the higher your income, the less your negative feelings. But how did they measure this? So similar to the sliding scale thing, there were a couple of words that they used to describe good feelings and a couple of words they used to describe bad feelings. For the good feelings, the words were confident, good, inspired, interested, and proud. For the bad feelings, the words were afraid, angry, bad, bored, sad, I've lost count of my counting, stressed, and upset. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. This is where it gets even more interesting, you guys. And what is it? What is it? If we recap, right, let's go back to the start where I talked about happiness and what are the categories of happiness? What constitutes happiness, right? And I broke it down to 3 things. If you remember clearly, I said circumstances, behavior, and well-being. This study has been really good to talk about well-being, to measure well-being. But what I actually find even more interesting is what I'm about to say, and it links to your behavior, it links to your attitude. This same study found that even amongst those who earned a shit ton of money, they still were not able to take away 2 negative feelings. Guess what it is? anger and stress. No matter how rich you are, you cannot stop being stressed. No matter how rich you are, you cannot buy away stress. Money does not buy you stresslessness. That's not a word. I know it's not a word, but the more money you have, you still have the same level of stress, or even perhaps more stress than someone with no money. Isn't that wild? And you being rich does not stop you from being angry. You being rich does not stop you from experiencing the feelings of anger and stress. And maybe you're even more stressed because you're working so hard to get the money. Do you get what I mean? And I find that really interesting. And that's why I mentioned that it links back to your attitude. This is my final point for today. Low earners were happier if they thought that money did not buy you happiness. Isn't that wild? I'm going to say that again. Low income earners were happier if they believed that money does not buy you happiness. And on the other hand, high income earners were happier if they truly believed that money bought you happiness. Isn't that crazy? And what does that tell us? What does this study tell us? What do all three studies tell us? What am I trying to tell you? It's all about your attitude. I mean, it's not all about your attitude. It's 1/3 about your attitude. It's 1 about your circumstances and really how much you earn, because it does matter. And 2, it's about your well-being. How good do you feel? Do you have your emotional and physical and mental well-being in check? And then thirdly, it's about your mindset. It's about your behavior. It's about your attitude. Because if you really do believe it's all about the little things in life, no one can convince you otherwise. You would genuinely feel that way. And you would genuinely think that you are happy, or feel and believe that you are happy with less. Because you believe it, that's just your reality. Whereas if you're more like me, material girls, where's your hands up? Then you truly just believe that more money will make you happier, right? And that is just your reality. You stand firm by it and you believe it, and it's sort of your experience. But this is what I want to leave you guys with, because I think that's the main point from all of this. It's that just think about why. Think about why you want to be rich. Why do you want money so much? Why are you striving to be a high income earner? Why is it? Because if all these studies are finding that the more money you have, yes, you do feel happier up until a certain extent, and then it just starts to not feel like anything else. You just start to feel just like you felt when you had slightly less. Then what's the point? Do you really want to stress yourself? Do you really want to kill yourself to get that much money? Think about how much you actually need in order to feel fulfilled. Think about how much you need for you to hit that sweet spot just before it starts to plateau. Just think about it. I think that's the lesson from this video. Think about how much money you need for it to give you all the good feelings, take away most of the negative feelings, and just hit that sweet spot for you. That's what you need to think about. Because why? It really does get to a point where more money does not mean more joy. And even if it means more joy, it just doesn't really mean extremely more joy. Like, you can feel that same amount of joy with probably less and less stress. It's something called hedonic happiness, hedonic adaptation. And that's what we're going to talk about in my next video. Bye. So if you're watching this 2 days later, then click right here to see the video about why rich people are just as sad and just as angry and just as stressed as we are. Click here to watch this video about hedonic adaptation.